Hey guys, this is Corey from Redefining Strength. Welcome to the Fitness Hacks Podcast. This is the show where I share all my free workout and nutrition tips. I'm not going to ever fill this episode with sponsorships or ask you to buy anything. All I ask in return is if you're enjoying the podcast to leave a review or leave a 5-star rating. Or even better, share it with someone you think it might help. This will only take a few minutes and would mean the world to me and possibly change the life of someone you know. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about balancing blood sugar. What does this even mean? Why is it important? Why do some people really stress over this? Let's talk about everything going on. Julia, thank you so much for joining me to really dive into this subject today.
Of course, I'm so thrilled to be here.
So first off, what is blood sugar in the first place?
So blood sugar, or blood glucose as we hear, is the main sugar that's found in your blood. So when you eat carbohydrates, they are broken down into glucose, which your blood transports to your cells to be used as energy. So the way we can think of this is after a meal, our blood sugars are going to be a little bit higher, and then our pancreas is going to respond by releasing what we call insulin, which then stimulates that uptake of glucose into our muscle cells. And then a few hours after a meal, our blood sugar is going to run a little bit lower. And during these times, our pancreas will release what we call glucagon, which stimulates the breakdown of those of that glucose storage known as our glycogen for our body to use for energy when we need it.
And so when we hear like this term, like high blood sugar, what does this really mean?
So with diabetes, we know with type 1 diabetes, they are insulin deficient, meaning that their bodies do not make enough insulin. And with type 2 diabetes, they are insulin resistant. So this is really important because when we talk about high blood sugar, insulin is really a key player here. I always explain it that insulin acts as the key that unlocks those muscle cells and allows glucose to get in there for us to use as energy. So when our cells become resistant to insulin, as they do with type 2 diabetes, this process doesn't run as smoothly, which causes glucose to remain in our blood, hang out in our bloodstream, and that shows up as high blood sugar.
Now, this being said too, and I like to bring this up because I think we can hear, about a health concern, an issue, and then we start to demonize things. I just want to touch on the fact that insulin is not a bad thing. Like people will just demonize it. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really important we do understand the nuance of things and just don't write something off.
Yeah, of course. It's totally normal to have insulin in our bodies throughout the day. Like you said, I think it can be something that becomes a little bit demonized because that term insulin resistance, we get nervous. And with speaking of type 2 diabetes, our bodies do continue to produce insulin to try to get that glucose into our cells. But for even healthy individuals, we need insulin to be able to use it every day. So it's definitely kind of thrown around sometimes and, not talked about in the best light, but it is definitely still essential for living a healthy lifestyle overall.
The more we understand these things, the more we can make sure that we're meeting ourselves where we're at, because there are some negative side effects, so to speak, of having high blood sugar. Can you tell me a little bit more about those and what we need to watch for with that?
Sure. So, long term, some of the consequences that we'll see things like chronic diseases, things like cardiovascular disease, non alcoholic fatty liver disease, kidney disease, metabolic syndrome. We can also run into hormonal imbalances. So, high insulin levels can lead to increased estrogen. So, in women, this can manifest in things like estrogen dominance, which leads to lower progesterone, which we can see in things like polycystic ovarian syndrome. And similarly, in men, this also has consequences. So, this high estrogen can lead to decreased testosterone levels. And then finally, just if you're someone out there who maybe you don't struggle with blood sugar necessarily, maybe you've never gotten any bad news from your doctor, but you're just someone who wants to lose weight and you want to live a healthier lifestyle overall, managing your blood sugar is really important for weight management. This is because insulin helps your body store glucose in the liver and muscles to fuel your body. So if you're someone who you want to complete a body recomp, this is also going to be so key. That extra glucose is stored as fat, which can lead to weight gain and trouble losing weight. So also super key there.
So whether we want to lose weight, improve our health, what can we do to balance our blood sugar?
First off, nutrition, building balanced meals. This is going to mean consuming adequate fat, fiber, and protein at meals. And this is because these foods really increase the time required for digestion. So that rate of gastric emptying into the small intestine is slowed, which ultimately reduces blood sugar spikes. And then in addition, since these foods are all pretty satiating, you won't experience cravings soon after mealtime and kind of get thrown on that blood sugar roller coaster that most people feel. So you have steady energy throughout the day, and you don't have those kind of crazy sugar cravings that some people may experience. And then the second step is building lean muscle mass. So increased muscle mass increases skeletal muscle glucose uptake and improves our insulin sensitivity as well. So building balanced meals and improving lean muscle are really the two best things we can do from a lifestyle perspective for managing our blood sugar.
I love that you mentioned building lean muscle because I think that's something that's so often overlooked too. And building lean muscle has such an impact on even, our metabolic health in terms of seeing better body recomp. And when we think about, oh, I burn more calories because I built lean muscle, it's not just the actual muscle that you're maintaining, it's all the other bodily processes that it is promoting that also increase your energy expenditure. So I love that you bring that up because muscle is so magical for so many different reasons. But on top of that, we're balancing our meals, we're focusing on building lean muscle. What other little habit changes can we make that can really pay off?
Sure. So, some other things, even just walking after meals, a simple walk can help blunt that immediate glucose spike that we experience and lower those overall levels of insulin. Research has shown that even just walking 10 minutes has been shown to lower your blood sugar by 22%. So, a pretty drastic amount. Other things to look out for managing stress. When we're stressed, our insulin levels fall and more glucose is released from the liver. At the same time, growth hormone and cortisol levels rise, which cause the body tissues to be less sensitive to insulin. And then finally, aside from nutrition, lifestyle, all of that, something we hear so often, but is so key. So I have to touch on it is prioritizing sleep. We know that not getting enough sleep has been linked to increases in our hunger hormones, our stress hormones, and other things leading to an increase in glucose levels throughout the day.
And adding in more walking is only going to help us potentially sleep better. We can do it, last thing in the evening after dinner. It can keep us from noshing on other things, which might be good too to help our weight loss or body recomp efforts. But it can help us relax before going to bed, sleep better, which then promotes, better blood sugar balance, overall better body recomp. So all these things are interconnected and we can really use them to our advantage. Going back to diet and nutrition, low carb diets are definitely popularized when it comes to balancing blood sugar. If anybody has any sort of different health concerns, can you talk a little bit about the nuance to that and the benefits, but also the downsides?
Of course, yeah. I mean, we see so much about low carb diets today, and of course, it is going to help if we're talking in terms of blood sugar management, insulin resistance, because it is essentially lowering carbs, whether it's restricting them completely or managing the amount that we're having to a very small portion size. So, essentially, yes, it's going to help with balancing blood sugar, but it's important to recognize that with any low carb diet or any restrictive diet for that nature, there will be some drawbacks. So, with low carb diets, we know that carbs provide fiber and energy, which really work to support our gut health, our hormones, our liver and gallbladder health, our thyroid health, our muscle growth, and our body recomp efforts. So, it cutting out carbs completely might not necessarily be the answer for you, but instead focusing on quality and the quantity of the carbs, we can make sure that we're managing our blood sugar and supporting our health overall versus just cutting them out completely. So as far as quality, focusing on really fiber-rich carbs, things like whole grains, whole wheat or sprouted bread, quinoa, brown rice, oats, beans, legumes, fruits, and vegetables. And then as far as quantity, focusing on the amount that we're having and making sure that we're including them in balanced meals. So if you're someone who hasn't counted macros, this is where this can be so key because you can dial in on those carbohydrate amounts and make sure that you are managing that. Typically anywhere from like a 20 to 30% or even more if you're training really hard can really help you make sure that you're managing that quantity factor of the carbohydrates.
I think you touched on something that's so important, and it goes back to the not demonizing anything, but understanding the nuance to it. It might not be that you even need to cut back on your carbs depending on your carb intake. It might be that you need to adjust the timing or the type. But also, low carb doesn't mean no carb. And low carb can be very different for different people. Low carb for one person, because of their activity level, could be different than someone who's not as active. So understanding that there might be some variation in what's right for us is super key, but also understanding the drawbacks to something as we might try and address another health concern that we have. Now, off of this, if we are looking at, adjusting our carb intake, if we're looking at adjusting, our training to building muscle, all these different things to balance our blood sugar, what are some ways we can maybe monitor our blood sugar levels if we feel we really need to?
Course. So first off, just asking your doctor to run some basic tests. A great one to get would be a glycosated hemoglobin A1C. This shows really a snapshot of the past 2 to 3 months of your average blood sugar over time. So a lot of times we'll hear people say, like, I just got blood work done and my blood sugar was a little bit high or something, but it's important to note that that just shows one kind of point in time, whereas that A1C really shows a snapshot of how blood sugar is controlled over those 2 to 3 months. And then you can also monitor them throughout the day. So I know some people have access to a continuous glucose monitor through their healthcare. And what this does is it tracks your glucose levels 24/7 throughout a tiny sensor that is inserted under your skin. So you can review how your blood glucose changes after meals, over a few hours, or day to day to really find those trends and find those things that may be spiking it or help you balancing it a little bit better.
So, off of this, there are a lot of things that we could stress over, which again will only raise our stress levels and potentially negatively impact a lot of things we're trying to work to control. But there are a lot of different things that we could focus on or worry about or get tests done for. Who would you really recommend maybe focus on this aspect or this type of testing?
I would say, I mean, first off, obviously, if you are someone who has gotten some news from your doctor regarding high blood sugar levels, a high A1C, either prediabetes or diabetes diagnosis, or if you are someone who maybe you are around that menopausal time period, you are really struggling with weight gain. We know that we do become a little bit more insulin resistant during that time due to the change in hormones. So that would also be a really beneficial time to focus and dial in on balancing your blood sugar.
I love that. I think knowing even where we can sort of bring some of these things in or pay more attention to specific things can help us not feel like we have to stress over everything. And it is remembering that the more we take things back to basics, the more we're going to hit on a lot of different health concerns or even help ourselves avoid having certain things pop up. So don't stress all the details before you need to, although be aware of where some of these things can come in and really play a part if you aren't seeing the results that you want snowball. So final takeaways, Julia, if someone's, considering really diving into balancing their blood sugar because they have gotten some news from their doctor or they might be worried about the results and the fact that they're not seeing them as quickly as they want, so they might think that this is part of the issue, what would you tell them to really start to focus on?
Just main key points that you can balance it through nutrition, focusing on building balanced meals like we talked about with protein, fat, fiber, and complex carbohydrates. And then secondly, maintain lean muscle mass, whether that be exercising daily, even going for the walks after meals, those other little things that we talked about. That's also going to be really, really huge to improve that insulin sensitivity. But also just going off of what you said, don't feel like you need to override everything you're doing. For some people, just focusing on one simple thing, like just adding more protein into your diet, that in itself will help balance out those meals and balance blood sugar. So it doesn't need to be a complete override of your diet, just focusing on those small things and taking it one step at a time.
You as a dietitian, I'm sure, are all about the diet. Not that I'm not all about the diet, but I have to admit, I really like the tip of adding in the walks even right after meals when we can, because I think that can also be a pattern interrupt into other habits like snacking that we might be struggling to control. So a lot of these things can have other benefits in terms of changing our environment, changing our other habits, creating, new routines and patterns that really help us see the results we want. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining me today. This was fabulous. Guys, if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to comment. We will go back through and link out to any other helpful resources, answer any questions you have to really help you make sure that you're balancing your blood sugar and seeing fabulous results. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Hacks podcast. Again, this is the place where I share all my free workout and nutrition tips. I'm never going to run sponsorships or ask you to buy anything. All I ask in return is if you're enjoying the podcast to leave a rating or review or share it with someone you think it might help. This will only take a few minutes and it would mean the world to me and possibly change the life of someone you know.